Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Sam McQuillan's with us from Legal Sports Report. You can read more about these stories and a whole lot more over on their website. Great to have Sam back in the house. And Sam, let's get started here and start off with a sports bookie operation busted in Staten Island, finding out millions and millions of dollars exchanging hands. Look, these still exist. I think it's important for people to know that these still exist. There's always going to be a market for this. And first, tell us more about the story, and then we'll dive into kind of why they do exist.
Yeah, for sure, Craig. The New York Police Department arrested 17 people in Staten Island this past week, part of an alleged illegal sports betting ring run by the Gambino crime family. So the Attorney General's office came out, unsealed this document with 84 counts of indictments across 17 individuals, allegedly saying that there was this sophisticated sports betting operation with an offshore sports book, and then a subsequent loan sharking operation where members of this alleged mob would go and try to get money from the people that had been betting with them, allegedly entangled roughly 70 bettors. And every week there would be about $500,000 in loans that they were making, trying to collect payments on. So a very old school kind of scenario here with a bookie and the Italian mob and Staten Island and things like that. And you talked about, people are surprised maybe this still goes on. You're alluding to the fact that New York legalized sports betting in January 2022. These crimes allegedly took place in September of that year, all the way to March of last year. So, yeah, like you said, it still goes on, and I'm sure we'll get into more why.
Yeah, and let's do that now, because I think that, for new people who are watching this show, maybe the new sports bettor, let's be honest, Sam, there are a lot of folks that are streaming us. They're 20 years old, 21, 19. Prior to the offshore sports books, prior to offshore, again, kids may not be familiar with that as well, which were just basically sports betting's been around for a long time. You just had to do it illegally. There were literally people back in the day, back in my day, that you'd pick up the phone, you make a phone call. And Sam, the key to this with the sports betting is that the bookie's role in this was essentially letting you bet without having to put any money up. So you just make a call, and you say, give me X amount on something. They say yes, no, maybe, I don't know how it would work. And I think that is still the lure for people. But I would tell you on a number of different levels, Sam, why that is bad. Number one, it's illegal. Number two, you have no backing sometimes for the money. And when you're betting legally, you deposit money into an account. You can afford to lose money. And here in this case, and we found out with Shohei Ohtani's interpreter the hard way here, sometimes you can't afford to lose the money that you're betting.
Yeah, Craig, these are cautionary tales for sure. It could be enticing to have, let's say they start you off with $500 of credit a week. You bet on all these sports. By the end of the week, you're down. Okay, I'll try to make it back next week. Maybe you call your guy, but eventually they come to collect for sure. And with apps like DraftKings and FanDuel, you deposit $10, $20 at a time. You lose the money, you have to put it back in. The money is there being exchanged before you can actually put the bet down. So that's why these types of things are really attractive to bettors as well. Some people who bet a lot of money can get limited on these apps as well, but it's attractive to bookies because it's a really easy way to pile up debt. Now, what I thought was really interesting in this whole thing is when they unsealed the documents, they showed this transcripts of all these calls back and forth with these guys talking about how this would work, talking about letting someone bet more and more until it's time to collect. He had a really good week. It'll all come back to us next week. And then one really interesting nugget as well, talking about, hey, this guy's been winning too much on certain kinds of boxing bets, certain specific rounds where you can make a lot of money if you really know what you're doing. So you're saying, hey, we need to limit him and make sure he's just betting straight bets and money line bets. So for those out there who are, banging the drum of legal sports books are limiting us, the offshore ones are limiting you as well. As long as you're winning a lot of money, they want to make sure that you're losing. So these folks face up to 25 years in prison, numerous charges stemming from, enterprise corruption, criminal usury, gambling promotion in the first degree. So they're in for a lengthy sentence, most likely. They'll next appear in court next month.
Okay. Interesting story there. All right. So now I think that this is a story that probably hits home for people. There's probably some people, by the way, Sam, watching us discuss this saying, what are they? These guys don't know. Of course I know what a bookie is. We thought we would educate you a little bit. Okay. So now you have that education. So then after the bookies came in, let's say about 20 years ago, I'm going to throw a number out there. All of a sudden you were able to bet online for people when the internet started on several different websites. This was before sports betting was legalized. And there are a ton of sports betting websites. But the problem is they were illegal. So they operated outside of the United States. And you would pay them how you would normally pay maybe FanDuel or DraftKings, but how you would get paid was very sketchy, to say the least. By the way, who you paid and how you got paid was very bizarre. Needless to say, one of these operators, and I'm not accusing them of anything, but they were the most popular for a long time, is Bovada. Now, Sam, they are still around, and they operate in, again, offshore markets, and also a very important tool to operate in markets where sports betting is not legal. Because again, if you live in a state where you can't bet on sports, you may find yourself to one of these. But sports betting now legal in Michigan, and they're trying to turn the tables on an offshore sports betting operator. What is the outcome going to be of this?
Yeah, Craig, Bovada's been around for as long as I can remember and is still going strong today and really benefits from the proliferation of legal sports betting and all the advertisement around that. A lot of people probably don't even know it's fully illegal in some legal states, but Michigan is leading the charge here, sending a cease and desist to Bovada. A couple of states have cracked down on it in the past, so they actually had until yesterday to leave the state. I haven't gotten any word on whether Bovada has actually complied. It's sort of tricky here because there's not much states can do when it's a company, based in Curacao like Bovada is, but they have left states like New York, Maryland, New Jersey, Nevada in the past once they've gotten the threat. But now once states are seeing, okay, Michigan's doing this, Connecticut just saw their example and is going to do the same thing next week, I'm told, send a cease and desist to Bovada. So some regulators, it's tough for them out, trying to ensnare this whole, you've got illegal bookies, you've got offshore websites. It's a lot to handle, but Massachusetts as well is preparing action. I'm told that they actually got the idea at a gaming conference this week where they caught up with Connecticut regulators, caught up with Michigan regulators, and were kind of inspired by the charge they took. So it's really interesting to see everyone coalesce around this. Whether or not Bovada will actually pull out could have big, ramifications for the offshore market. Like you alluded to, it's one of the biggest ones. It often gets confused as a legal one just because they're, so present online and get picked up by a lot of legacy news outlets, quite frankly. So if Bovada were to all of a sudden leave, 3 new states, it's like, where does the buck stop? Are more states going to make it leave? And eventually, what does that do to the offshore market? Do, more states get emboldened? Does the Department of Justice get involved, like the legal market's been asking forever? So it's an interesting development. We'll see what happens next in this whole Bovada scenario.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, Bovada's already operating illegally. So it feels like a state is saying, we're going to let you operate illegally continually, just not in our state. Very bizarre. But anyway, we'll read more about it over at Legal Sports Report. All right, real quick, PrizePicks giving access to free problem gambling services. Really good news for the industry here.
Yeah, PrizePicks making some good headlines. They're partnering with Kindbridge Behavioral Health to essentially provide a range of mental health services for folks impacted by problem gambling, including clinical assessments, clinical reviews, care plan development, educational and peer support groups. They're essentially footing the bill for these really important services. It's a really good move for them. They've obviously been in some negative headlines recently, so it's a good opportunity for them to kind of get in front of everything on the problem gambling front. And hopefully other operators see it and are inspired.
All right, Sam. Great stuff as always. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week here on NewsWire.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. You too.